Let's go ahead and let's create our authentication screens. For that, we first have to know the basics of how routing works inside of Next.js. So let's go inside of the source, inside of the app folder. And inside of here, I'm going to create a new folder called sign in. And then inside of that, I'm going to create a page.tsx. So page is a reserved file name inside of Next.js, and whenever used inside of the app folder, depending on what folder it is in, that will become a part of the URL. So let's go ahead and learn that a bit. Make sure that inside of your app folder, you have created a sign-in folder and then a page.tsx. Inside of that file, what's important is that you do default exports. So I'm going to call this sign in page like this and a div sign in page. So this export default is very important. The name of the constant doesn't matter. It can be called anything. The only thing that matters is that you do a default export here. And now that we know that our folder is named signed-in, we can visit that URL. So I'm going to quickly enable something here called developer mode so that you can see my URL at all times here. So I'm going to go to localhost 3000/sign-in, and I don't have my app running, so let me just go ahead and do that quickly, and also a reminder for you in case you don't have your app running. There we go. So now, after I visit /sign-in, you can see that I'm on the sign-in page. So what happens if I don't do the default export here? What happens if I just do export const without the export default? Well, what will happen is that we have an error because the default export is not a React component. Great, so let's go ahead and roll this back. And let's ensure that we have our sign-in page visible. So that's one thing I want you to learn. The other thing I want you to learn is another reserved file, just like page is, called the layout. So you already have the default layout here in your project, and ours is going to be similar to this, but also a little bit different because this is the root layout. You are most likely never going to change this file except adding some providers or changing the fonts, right? But other than that, this will mostly stay exactly as it is. But the convention it follows is, well, quite similar, right? So if I go inside of the app folder, sign in, and if I create layout.tsx inside of this file, and I do the exact same thing, so I'm going to call this sign in layout and a div hello layout. So what will happen now, interestingly, on the same route that I was before, /sign in, I'm now seeing hello layout. So it looks like our layout file has overridden the page file. Well, that's because we are not using the layout file properly. So the layout files are used for reusable things. So the proper way of using this is to create an interface, sign in layout props, and define the children as a required prop here, because every sign-in layout, which is a reserved file, will always have children. So you don't have to worry about where they come from. Next.js will handle that for us. So now that we have the children, which are safely typed in this interface above, instead of rendering hello layout, we can render the children inside. And there we go. Now you can see that my page is rendered instead, sign in page. So what is the purpose of this layout file, you might ask? Well, very simple. Let's go ahead and let's add a class here, flex column. And let's pretend to have a navbar here. I'm going to go ahead and give this navbar a background red 500 and a height of 10. And I'm going to go ahead and add a paragraph navbar. So this is what layouts are used for. So if I, for example, had another route inside of sign-in page, for example, let's go ahead and call this test. It really doesn't matter for now. I'm going to go inside of this test and add another page.tsx file. I'm going to call this test page and do a default export and test page here. So how do I access this test page? Well, I go to /sign-in and then /test. That's how you do nested routes. So follow along as I do. Go to /sign-in /test. And there we go. Here's the cool thing. The navbar is completely unchanged, but the content of the page has changed. So that is the purpose of layout files. So you can add reusable layouts to your pages, right? So For example, in our out screens, I want both my login and register routes to have similar layouts. So this layout file is perfect for that. Later on the dashboard screen, I'm gonna want to have a sidebar, and I want all of my routes to have a sidebar as well. So I'm again gonna use a different layout for that. So that is the purpose of that. Great, and now let's go ahead and do the following. Let's remove this test file, we no longer need it. Let's remove the layout from the sign-in as well. And now I'm going to show you one cool thing that you can do. Let's just go back to /sign-in here. So you've learned that every single folder which has a page.tsx inside will create a URL. Well, that's not always true, because you can create something called a route group, and I'll show you why they are powerful. So let's go ahead and create an out group. We do that by naming the folder inside of our parentheses. So I'm going to call this out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop sign in inside of the out folder. And now I have this prompt to update imports. You can always say yes for this. And I seem to have no unsaved files. If you do, you can just click here and save them. So what happens now exactly? Well, first of all, let's check how our routes work. I am at localhost 3000/sign-in, and if I refresh, everything works just fine, right? So you might have expected this to be something like this maybe, but no. So whenever there is a folder inside of parentheses, that means that that part is omitted from the URL. So that's the purpose of route groups. And what's cool about this is that I can now go ahead and copy the sign in, paste it inside of out, and call this sign up, for example. Go inside of sign up page.tsx. Let's change this to be sign up page, and change this to be sign up page. So now both of my routes here, both of my out routes are inside of my out route group here. So then I can go to /signup, and on the URL side, they seem to be, independent of one another, right? They seem to behave like separate routes, but we know that inside of our code base, they are held together in this route group. And here's the coolest thing about this. While they are omitted from the URL, they can have their own layouts. So if you add layout.tsx inside and follow the same thing we did earlier, so this time I'm going to call this out layout. If I save this, there we go. So now both my sign up route and my sign in routes have the same overridden text coming from the layout file. So let's go ahead and do the thing we did earlier, which is proper use of out layout. So interface out layout props, children, React node, and inside of here, out layout props with the children inside, and render the children inside of instead of the text. And there we go. Now we have a shared layout file in two different routes, and we ensured that no other routes will share that layout because of this route group. So both sign in and sign up now share the same layout. And again, you can do the navbar trick to showcase how that looks. What I want you to do next is to find a logo for this project. And here's a handy website you can use called Logo Ipsum. So Logo Ipsum is something like a placeholder logo collection here, which you can easily just click and you copy the SVG. So what's important is that you don't actually use this for your business. You are free to use this, for demos, for tutorials, but don't use this for your business, and just refer to the guidelines of this website. But it's a very, very handy website for finding quick, nice looking logos for your projects. So here I am, I'm going to find a logo that I like, for example, this one. And now what we have to do is we have to create this SVG file. So I just clicked and that copied the SVG. And now we have to actually create that. So what we don't have is the public folder. So let's go ahead and create a public folder in the root of our application. So not in the source folder. It needs to be outside. Inside of the public folder, let's go ahead and let's add a logo.svg file inside. And let's paste everything inside of here. There we go. So I just pasted the entire thing that I copied, and now I have logo.svg here. And now let's go ahead and go inside of our source, inside of our app, auth layout.tsx right here. And let's simply go ahead and render this logo inside of a Next.js image. So import image from next image. Let's add a source to logo.svg. Let's give it a height of 50 and a width of 100, for example, and an alt of logo like this. I'm now going to close this website. So again, just click on the logo and you have copied the SVG. You can also directly download it by clicking here. And there we go. We now have our logo right here. What I want to do is just change its color because we are going to be using a specific blue color throughout our project, and I just want to stay true to that color. So let's go inside of our logo.svg, and if you copied the same logo as I did, you can then go ahead and find the fill option right here and just change it to a new color. And then when you refresh, there we go. Now it has a blue logo and I like this way better. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's add this layout and let's actually give it, some nav bars, some buttons and other stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this div with a main element, and I'm going to give it a class name of background neutral 100 and a minimum height of screen. So it takes up the whole page. And I have removed the image tag, but I am going to leave the image import because we're going to use it in a second. And now let's go ahead and let's add a div here with the class name mxauto max width screen 2xl and padding of 4, and make sure you put children inside of that div. There we go. So you can see how now this is centered. And what did we achieve with max width screen 2xl? Well, this is what we achieved. At a certain point, you can see how our page stops expanding, right? So when I'm zoomed in, you can see it's following the edge of the screen, it's following, but when it reaches a certain point, it will stop following the screen. So this means that if your screen is too large, we're not gonna, resize all of our elements needlessly. Instead, we're just gonna allow you this specific box on the screen for you to work with. So that's what that part achieved, in case you were wondering. Great, so we have that now. And now let's go ahead and let's create our navbar element here. So our navbar element will have a class name of flex, justify between, and items center. Inside of the navbar, we're going to have a div, and then we're going to have our image. Let's give this div a flex items center and gap of 2. And the image will have a source of logo svg. Make sure you put a / in front of the source, an alt of logo, a width of 152, and a height of 56. And there we go. You can see that now we have our logo once again, but this time it is properly positioned and inside of semantic navbar element here. And one thing that I think we actually don't need is the wrapper around the image. So let's go ahead and remove this div and just keep the image directly inside of the navbar, like this. Now, here's another thing we're going to add inside of the navbar. Let's add a div, and this time we are actually going to knit this. So flex item center and gap of 2. And inside of here, we're going to have a button. And let's go ahead and give this, my apologies, let's give this button a variant of secondary. And for now, let's just go ahead and write sign up, like this. And again, I've made the same mistake. I keep planning on having 2 buttons, but we are not going to have 2 buttons. My apologies. So you can remove this div, and instead of the navbar, just have an image and the button. My apologies once again. There we go. So now we have a sleek looking navbar here, which has a sign up button and a logo right here in the opposite corner. Great. And now outside of this navbar component, let's go ahead and let's add a div component here. And let's go ahead and give this a class name of flex column items center, justify center, padding top of 4, and on medium devices, padding top of 14. There we go. So now you can see that our text here is centered like this. And it also has quite some spacing here. And if I zoom in, you can see that it kind of has, well, you can see that there's a jump in the padding right on a specific breakpoint. This is going to be more visible later when we have some actual elements to show. Before we go ahead and actually develop our sign up and sign in pages, I quickly want to go back inside of my source app folder and then inside of my layout.tsx file here. And I actually want to remove this local fonts and I want to use the Inter font. So this is what I'm going to do. Inside of my app layout, I'm going to import Inter from Next Font Google. I'm going to remove the local font. We are not going to need it. So I'm going to remove both of this here, like that. And instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add const inter to be inter, which we imported above, subsets Latin. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the following. I'm going to import cn from @libutils. If you remember, when we set up chat.cn, we explored this little cn util, which will help us merge this font class. So let's go ahead and do the following. Inside of our body element, I'm going to go ahead and remove the entire thing. I'm going to add cn inter class name, and then I'm going to add anti-alias. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. I'm sorry. And let me just confirm that I didn't. Yes, so this is the proper command name. My apologies. And after that, minimum height of screen. Make sure you add this as well. There we go. So now we have a new font. And here's another thing you might see me do a lot. I like to order my imports in a specific way. So the imports which are coming from packages will always be at the top for me. After that, I'm going to go ahead and have my aliased imports. And after that, I'm going to have my relative imports. So that's how I like to separate them. You don't have to follow that. It's just a habit that I have. Great. So just make sure that inside of your root layout, inside of the app folder, you have changed the font name to Inter, and you have added a minimum height of screen. This is a new class which comes default from, I think, Chat.cn version. I'm not exactly sure what it does. You can explore that for yourself. All right, now let's go ahead and let's go back inside of our app folder, inside of our sign in page.tsx. And here's how I want to do this. So I don't want to directly develop this here. I actually want to create my sign in card like this, which I currently don't have. And now let's go ahead and let's actually develop the sign in card. And we're going to do that by creating our features folder. If you remember it from when we were discussing our Tailwind config, and we ensured that our Tailwind config covers the features folder, where this is where that now becomes very important. So once again, go inside of your Tailwind config.ts and double check that you have the source features folder added here. Now let's go inside of features. We can remove the test component. And inside of here, we can go ahead and we can add a new folder called auth. And very simply, inside of this folder, we're going to keep everything auth related, including components. And inside of the components, we're now going to create our sign-in card.tsx like that. Let me just double check inside of my app folder, inside of page, that I'm not using, that deleted feature test file. It looks like I'm not. Everything seems to be working just fine. Now let's quickly go back inside of the sign-in card, inside of features auth components. And whenever I work with components, I'm going to do named exports. So I'm not going to do export default here. I only do export defaults for my pages and for my layouts, because that is what Next.js requires. So let's export const sign-in card here. And let's just return a div sign-in card. And now we can go back inside of our auth folder, sign in, page.tsx, and we can import this from features auth components sign in card. And then we can go ahead and develop further right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and import everything we need from our card. If you remember, we